Welcome to another episode of Telegeography Explains the Internet, the show that explores the business behind all of the ways humans stay connected around the world. I'm your host, as always, Greg Bryan, and my guest today is Stan Hubbard, who is Principal Analyst at MEF. And of course, this MEF is the formerly known as Metro Ethernet Forum, not the Mobile Ecosystem Forum, since we've had both of them on the show a few times. So we have, as I said, had MEF on the show several times before, and they come up more often than that, in no small part due to the fact that I think the work they do there aligns very well with many of the things we focus on here at Telegeography. In particular, we've talked a lot on this show about the emergence of network as a service, NAS, and carrier automation in general. So Stan recently authored a report at MEF on the state of the industry for automating business functions between service providers. And I wanted to have him on the show to discuss his findings and see where the telecom industry is at with adopting these new technologies. Stan first explains the drivers in the market and why telecom service providers need to automate just to stay relevant and competitive, and then gets into the path carriers can take to achieve this goal. We then talk a little bit more specifically about his report and get details on the state of adoption of automation in the industry, why customized or proprietary APIs are inefficient, the benefits of standardization, how enterprises are driving automation, and even how blockchain will be crucial to network contracts in the future. So this was a really illuminating conversation for me, and I hope it will be for you as well. Okay, welcome to the show, Stan.
Hey, thanks, Greg. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad we could finally connect. It took us a little while to make this happen, but here we are. It's going, so I'm excited.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah. All right. Well, we always start out with a brief intro. I think I first met you back many years ago when you were Stan the Ethernet man. But why don't you tell us a bit about your journey to becoming the principal analyst at MEF?
Yeah, so I've worked about 25 years in the industry. I started out with Sienna. I spent about 7 years there. And then I moved on to Light Reading, the heavy reading research arm of Light Reading. Mm-hmm. And I worked there as a senior analyst and chaired their biggest global and regional networking events. And that's where I got the Ethernet I guess Etherman doll made.
Oh, it's Stan the Etherman. I gotcha. Oh, yeah. I remember that with a little cape, right? Yes.
Yeah, except the cape I have now is all busted up, so I don't fly anymore. But in any case, I had a great time there. And then I joined MEF about 10 years ago, and I'm the principal analyst at MEF now, heavily focused on our strategic initiatives that are related to things like automation, network as a service, SD-WAN, SASE, et cetera.
Right.
So it's been a great role here at MEF. Had a chance to engage with executives from leading service and technology companies around the world. And also during my time at MEF, I've had other roles such as the chair of our global networking events and the director for our internal communications and press and analyst relations.
Yeah, there's one of the reasons I love talking to you about this kind of stuff. We have similar roles. I am an analyst who also ran some conferences and whatnot. So we're coming at it from the same angle. That makes it a lot of fun for me, definitely.
Yeah, yeah. So you know the challenge of the conferences.
Oh boy, yeah. Mine were much smaller than yours too. So I really appreciate what you're doing there. Pascal, your CTO at MEF has been on the show a couple of times, I think, and we've certainly brought up MEF a lot. I've also had the Mobile Ecosystem Forum on the show. So just to allay any confusion that might be out there, could you give us a brief background on MEF for anyone who may not have caught those episodes or whatever?
Yes, sure. Happy to do that. So MEF is an industry standards organization that we're composed of nearly 200 member companies from around the world, and that includes about 130 service providers, data center players, cloud providers, as well as technology companies. So the technology test and certification companies and others would make up the remainder of that number. And we've been focused on really accelerating this industry transformation to dynamic services that ultimately are going to be orchestrated across a global ecosystem of automated networks. And these networks are going to be built with standardized services and standardized APIs. And those APIs automate at both the business and the operational process levels.
Mm-hmm.
And they're automating between ecosystem partners. And the type of service, I mentioned dynamic services. One example of a dynamic service that's emerging is quite popular is the network as a service.
Right, exactly. Which is how we're going to sort of color our conversation today. Of course, as you sort of alluded to, there's a lot that goes around making network as a service, or NAS, happen. But before we jump right into that, coming up here in the start of October is your global NAS event. I'm going to be there, but why don't you tell us a little bit more about that, if folks are interested in considering attending, perhaps.
Sure. The G&E event is a global NAS event. As you mentioned, it'll be held in the first part of October in Dallas. And we're bringing together the ecosystem of players, really, that, including enterprises, including service providers and technology vendors, all looking at, basically what we're trying to do is having a common definition of NAS to start with, but then evolving networks in the direction of NAS. And I think the key thing here is you think about NAS today. It's about the ability to have those services delivered across an ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
So NAS services in the past might have been delivered over a single network, but
Right.
what we're talking about is being able to deliver NAS services over an automated supply chain. Right. So focusing on that enterprise experience and then having it carry throughout the ecosystem.
Yeah, absolutely. So the sort of plug is that if you're interested in the conversation that Stan and I are about to have, that is what there's going to be, hundreds of such conversations and presentations and panels to that effect at the event. So definitely, yeah. So I want to dive into it then, and the way I think I might like to start is just thinking about kind of how we find ourselves getting that as a service up to the network. And what I mean by that is that, as consumers, we're all used to things becoming more as a service, whether that's Netflix going from receiving a disc in the mail to watching things on demand. That's the way everyone consumes software now. I guess if you're over 40 or so, you might remember getting an optical drive in the mail and having a little license on it and putting it in your machine and downloading the software.
Yeah.
Nobody consumes things that way anymore. We often joke at Telegeography that we should start calling what we do research as a service, just to keep up with everybody else, right?
All right, you can charge a lot more.
Exactly, right. But the upshot is that all of these, especially IT digital things that we consume, we've consumed in this way because it's more convenient from just a practical standpoint, as well as a billing standpoint, all these kinds of things. And of course, we've seen for a long time that had to get to the network, right? But that involves kind of both sides of that. There's the enterprises want to consume network as a service, but on the carrier end, like you alluded to, if that's not just in a sort of cabin situation, like a data center to data center situation, for example, that's really complicated. And you mentioned there's this entire ecosystem. How do we start to even think about getting that whole ecosystem able to have connectivity be part of this X as a service world?
Yeah, great question. Let me kind of start with whether you call it network as a service or whether you call it on-demand services or dynamic services. Really what we're seeing is, the communications industry as a whole has been moving on this multi-year transformation journey,
Mm-hmm.
right? To deliver these dynamic, secure services across that global ecosystem of automated networks. And the primary reason the industry is moving this direction is enterprises are accelerating digital transformation and cloud migration.
Right.
Service providers are responding to that and trying to get out ahead of the enterprise requirements. And they're striving to empower those enterprise customers with innovative solutions that are designed to meet a wide range of needs, such as, connectivity needs, cloud access, application performance, visibility control, cybersecurity. And those needs are being met within these multi-cloud and work from anywhere type environments, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what we have, and this is a process that, really began, I would say close to a decade ago within the community.
With like
Where,
SDN and that kind of thing?
well, it began with SDN, but I'm thinking about the automation side of things. When we first started having discussions about creating this global ecosystem that would ultimately be based on standards, we started those conversations with TM Forum, and we brought in, as part of those discussions, the ITW Global Leaders Forum and so forth. But what we really have is the industry, service providers, technology solution providers, industry organizations, all collaborating now at a stepped up pace to build out that standards-based ecosystem. And the goal here is being able to accelerate service delivery across multiple providers, right? Speed time to revenue, provide a cloud-like customer experience, empower the new innovations like network as a service.
Right.
So first and foremost, that begins with the service providers and the other ecosystem partners wanting to provide that cloud-like experience for the enterprise.
Right.
So that means not only seamlessly delivering dynamic services when and where they want them, but also providing visibility into those services end to end, regardless of the customer locations, regardless how many networks that those services have to transit. And more recently, it also means enabling enterprise software developers, enterprise applications, enterprise systems to directly interact with the service provider networks via standardized APIs. So you'll hear more about things like intent-based APIs. And, that's an area of focus that's emerging within MEF. It came up in conversation at our Montreal meeting recently, and we'll be having more work in that area. But what we've done so far is really not dealing with the intent-based APIs. It's dealing more with the automation between service provider buy and sell partners, and also extending that automation out to the enterprise. But we can get into that here in a minute.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's useful here, maybe for folks listening, to paint maybe a sort of clear picture of, as I'm an enterprise, sourcing IT infrastructure manager kind of person. In the world that we've lived in for the last couple of decades here, I call up my provider or providers. I have a protracted negotiation kind of situation where I let them know through the RFI and whatnot, sort of what my network needs are geographically, products, bandwidth, all that kind of thing. Then the provider goes and they source that through their connections, which is phone calls and emails and whatnot, right? And we're talking about a very kind of long process. And what you're talking about is what I know the folks sitting in that enterprise side want is I can go and spin up a cloud instance in 30 seconds, right? I can, at the risk of getting out of my depth, if I need to do some container computer, Kubernetes, all those kinds of buzzy word kind of things, I can just go into a portal and do that. And so what you're sort of painting the picture of is this world that we're trying to get to, where I can go to a portal, I can order a network, and it arrives almost instantaneously, right?
Right. That's what we talk about when we say first and foremost focus on the enterprise experience, right? So if you think about the typical time it takes to order a service, have it delivered, it's at least 60 to 90 days. You hear that often, right?
And that's after the negotiation period and figuring out the RFI, and that's just when you've made the order, right?
Yeah, that exactly. So you hear folks like Jack Pugacheski from Lumen, who's heavily involved in MEF. He likes to say, really the community is focused on delivering that Netflix-like viewing experience with an Amazon-like buying experience, right? And that's where we want to get to as a service provider community, as an ecosystem supporting those enterprise end users. And so, if you think about NAS, it's all about, you know, having that service delivered in a more agile way and enabling the enterprise to have a much better customer experience. But, you know, the issue that we face right now is, various definitions of NAS, right?
Hmm.
And so we've got a challenge as an industry to sort of align on a common vision. So if you think back over the past couple of years, we've seen this, or if you think about the past couple of years, we've seen this resurgence of market interest and activity related to network as a service.
Hmm. Hmm.
As you know, the concept has been around for about a decade or so, with some of the early technical standards being done by players like
Right.
ITUT, right?
Right.
So today there's no common definition of NAS or its major components, and some perspectives are really high level,
Hmm. Hmm.
such as defining network as a service as a model that enables customers to consume networks as a
Right.
service,
Not as a
right?
technical process, but as a description
Right.
of how the market works, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. And then others like the TMF and ITUT offer more technical perspectives for building NAS services. And of course, the technology vendors, the industry analyst community, they all have different perspectives on this.
Hmm.
So, in my role at MEF, in the principal analyst role that I have, I'm working with our CTO, Pascal Menezes, and other members of the team to develop what we call a NAS blueprint that will help service providers create NAS service bundles. Well, first of all, it'll set out a MEF perspective on what NAS is, and then we'll kind of put that in the context of other definitions of NAS that are part of the industry, so you can see kind of where we see things fitting together,
Right.
and and then we'll share those components of that NAS definition that we have. So our working view right now is that NAS platforms combine on-demand connectivity, application assurance, cybersecurity, and multi-cloud based services
Hmm.
across that automated ecosystem, right? And of course, that's designed to help enterprises achieve business outcomes without having to build and maintain their own infrastructure.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I think a couple of things that I would put a pin in there is that first, this isn't the bigger NAS picture isn't just about spinning up bandwidth between point A and point B, but rather sort of the whole network ecosystem up to SASE and SD-WAN, which you guys have also worked on clarifying for the market, I should say too. And then also that, as you mentioned there, that this is about, from the enterprise perspective, the sort of the business of it, right? That I think I've mentioned this on the show a few times, but I think it's a point worth driving home, that for a very long time the network was a cost that you had to have there to sort of enable your business to operate, but it's really the case. It strikes me that in this NAS kind of world that we're envisioning, the network and the whole digital transformation process becomes a business driver. It becomes how far outside of just the technology companies or whatever, but whatever kind of vertical you're in, maybe with some exceptions, you need to think about what do I get as new business opportunities and for my
Right.
customers out of the network, which I really think is cool. It puts the WAN in a very different light than, oh, this is a cost that we have to have there, and that's that. But instead,
Yeah.
what can we do with
Yeah.
this that's new and exciting?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great way to say it. The way I think of it is the whole entire NAS ecosystem. There has to be collaboration across that ecosystem,
Hmm.
but ultimately everybody's going to benefit. They're going to benefit by going through the digital transformation themselves, right? They're going to be more agile. They're going to be more productive as they go through and automate processes end to end. And then they're going to be able to deliver a better customer experience. So you think about NAS solutions, they're going to be elastic. The services are going to be dynamic, and they'll generally have these advanced capabilities. Greater user control, real-time application-driven changes, end-to-end performance visibility, pay-as-you-go, monthly subscription options, etc. Now, the one of the key points that we're emphasizing as we talk about NAS is it's going to require the coordination of the federation of resources provided by numerous ecosystem partners, right?
Mm-hmm.
So whether you call it NAS or dynamic services, the key point is that you're going to see this shift around the world towards more cloud-like services, and they're going to be delivered across that automated ecosystem, and you have to have standardized APIs, sort of acting like Lego, think of it as Lego blocks, sort of all these different players connecting together.
Mm-hmm.
These APIs are the transfer of information between those different players, right?
Right.
It's kind of where the Lego blocks would connect, right? And so you have to be able to pass information more efficiently in an automated way, business level transactions, operational performance data, and so forth. So that's what we're doing. We're building out that ecosystem, that automated supply chain, and you can't really have network as a service unless you have a standardized approach for how you put all that together.
Right, right, and that's because if we take it back to maybe sort of the current world, or maybe even a few years ago, let's say I'm an enterprise, I'm sourcing my WAN, I go to my maybe one or two sort of large providers, and they then have to get for me a bunch of local access loops that they don't have on net, maybe some broadband circuits, some DIA, whatever it is. Now, in order to do that in an automated fashion, they would have had to have built up APIs with all of those different providers. And just for anybody who doesn't have this picture in their mind, of course, there's everyone can name these sort of big WAN services providers, AT&T, Orange, BT, Verizon. Well, they have to work with literally thousands and thousands of providers for even a fairly modestly sized, multinational network, because no one's wires go absolutely everywhere for any customer, basically, right? And so in that world, they're maybe creating a set of providers that they have APIs with that they can then offer kind of some on-demand services through. How does that differ from the world that you're envisioning with this work with MEF?
Yeah. So great setup here. So if you think about where the industry is, there's still a large number of service providers that are doing things in a manual way. I know it sounds kind of crazy, but that's the way it's been.
Yeah.
Just because automating can be very expensive. So what you have is you have a lot of processes that are still manual with spreadsheets, phone calls, et cetera, right? And that introduces a lot of human error.
Mm-hmm.
So what you've seen, of course, up until fairly recently, is a significant number of service providers were, the ones that had large volumes with each other that could justify an investment, implemented what we would call proprietary or customized APIs. They may have started with a TM Forum standard, but those standards are fairly loose and generic, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so each time a service provider would implement a particular API with a partner, it becomes customized, proprietary. So they could spend 12 to 18 months to implement an API to do something like quote and ordering, right? So that, what we've seen is a limited number of service providers have implemented a limited set of APIs, proprietary APIs, customized APIs with their partners for a limited number of services, and it requires significant investment. When I say limited number, it may be a large number,
Mm-hmm.
but in the whole scheme of things, when you're thinking about thousands of service providers,
Exactly
it's
my
a
point.
portion,
As a percentage, right? There's just I mean, again, for people who don't focus on this area of the telecom world that might be listening, there are providers, ISPs or whatever that might operate in a couple of metros, in the world. So
right.
if you're sitting there as a global WAN provider, there are literally, thousands to 10,000 providers out there whose network you may at some point need to utilize, basically.
Yeah. So what we have then is, up until recently, we've had all these proprietary APIs, but the point here, that we want to get to, is the recognition that proprietary customized APIs simply will not scale if we're if we're trying to build out an ecosystem that will ultimately support
Right.
dynamic services, NAS services across that ecosystem, right? Because it takes enormous amount of time and enormous amount of resources to do that investment. And so what MEF has introduced is an approach that is leveraging the work of TMF, but we've introduced what we call tightly defined context, right? Around those APIs that enable service providers to interoperate and be able to support a large number of services with a large number of partners. So basically make a significant investment one time in those APIs, beginning with the the business process level. So address validation, POQ, quote, order, inventory, and so forth, right? So you automate those business processes between buy and sell partners. And then once the service is up and running, you can then implement operational APIs, which we've also introduced now in our most recent release called the Fergie SDK release. And those operational APIs will be able to give you performance data shared between service providers, right? And so this is really exciting because now you have the full life cycle of business processes, operational processes, with information being shared across the ecosystem becoming available. So it's exciting to see this shift. And so what that allows us to do as an industry is to be able to scale with many service provider partners and and many services, different types of services, right?
Right.
Not just Ethernet, but internet access, dark fiber, wavelength services, SASE, SD-WAN, edge compute, and so forth. So just to drive that point home, there was a service provider that was looking at implementing the APIs, the business process APIs from MEF. And he said, look, if I had to continue to do business and implement proprietary APIs with my partners, and they had 200 plus partners around the world.
Right.
He said, I would still be here working on it 100 years from now.
Right? That's not going to work.
That's not going to work. And that was a large tier 2 service provider.
Mm-hmm.
So imagine being even larger than that, and you've got maybe 400 plus partners around the world. It's impossible to scale without a standardized approach. And so that's why we're seeing a huge number of companies jump on board the bandwagon with the MEF APIs.
Right. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. It is an area very ripe for a sort of drop-in, plug-and-play solution. And I should say that then as the other providers all around the world hoping to work with each other when we go to an ITW conference or whatever, that's one of the interesting things about the telecom market is the old sort of co-opetition model, right? Every telecom has to work with each other. You open yourself up, I take it from what you're explaining, to doing business with maybe some folks that you wouldn't have had the opportunity to break through with before if you have this sort of lack of friction of working with you, right? Right,
absolutely. So we see that within you mentioned ITW. We see that within the ITW, we have really good, fantastic support from what was called the ITW Global Leaders Forum, right? Mm-hmm. So 32 international service providers around the world are part of that ITW GLF board. And, they have a focus on these emerging requirements, these connectivity requirements that are on this end-to-end basis, right? They're looking to it's basically a wish list for NAS capability.
Right.
Having capacity on demand, real-time inventory, route diverse selection, usage-based pricing, QoS guarantees spanning multiple providers, et cetera. And so they're very supportive of the work that MEF is doing around the business and operational APIs. And in fact, half of those service providers as part of the GLF are already committed to implementing and onboarding, and an additional number are exploring the APIs with their partners. So that's one huge element of the ecosystem. But another element of the ecosystem is what's happening sort of in that a middle
Mm.
mile player.
Yeah.
The emerging NAS type solution providers. Those that are kind of leveraging the assets of data centers and so forth.
Yeah, because if you
So
said the word NAS, especially maybe like a year or two ago, maybe a lot of folks would have automatically thought of the packet fabrics, the megaports of the world, that kind of thing.
yeah, exactly. So no matter where you sit in the ecosystem,
Hmm.
you'll want to be able to interface with standardized APIs.
Right.
And just to give you an idea, kind of put a little perspective around that, Console Connect, they've got these interconnected data centers. They have this on-demand environment with between all those data centers, hundreds of data centers, and so that obviously is a great platform for NAS. And what they're doing is leveraging the MEF APIs to extend that automation out on in the edge to
Right.
their access partners, right? Bring them into the ecosystem. So buy and sell with Console Connect and leveraging those APIs to have that more automated experience all the way out to the customer site, right?
Yeah, interesting case too, because you have your sort of pure play a cloud born kind of alternative provider being acquired by a telco, right? And so you
Yeah.
can marry those two worlds together, right? So
And driving the transformation within the telco.
right,
It's a great story.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. All right, so Stan, when we were first setting up this podcast, you sent to me this report that you've been working on, and I'd like to now kind of jump into that, the specifics of it. So you've done some again work that's very near and dear to me. So it's survey work of the carriers out there in the world and how they're coming along with some of these automation and standards. Could you tell us a bit about that report and what's in it?
Yeah. So the report is it's called "State of the Industry: Paradigm Shift: Automating Business Functions Between Service Providers." So this report's available for free at mef.net/report, and you can download the report and a companion deck.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically, this report is based on research that we've done over the last couple of years, in which we've engaged with a huge number of service providers and others around the world, looking at this whole topic of automating business functions with the use of the APIs. So we put that work within the context of the overall industry transformation that we've kind of talked through here. But what we're seeing right now, I mean, at the time of the report, we had more than 122 companies, 122 service providers that were in some stage of the adoption
Well,
lifecycle,
mm-hmm.
from interest through to implementation of the APIs. And now that number's actually climbed quite a bit, because that report came out at the time of ITW, and of course we've had a lot of discussions since then.
Right.
So now we have more than 135 service providers around the world in some stage of the adoption lifecycle.
And that's I should say that's a pretty big chunk of the sort of multinational,
Yeah,
multi-regional kind of WAN services providers. I mean, a really
yeah,
big chunk. Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the key point here is that we quite quite a while ago had already reached critical mass. So
Yeah.
the train has left the station. People are jumping on board, and we're rolling down the track quite nicely. So we have at least 63 companies already committed, planning, developing, testing, or in production stages with the APIs, and we're essentially on track to have somewhere close to 69, 70 by the end of 2024
Mm-hmm.
that will have implemented the APIs, and then we'll surge ahead to somewhere close to 100 by the end of 2025. And one of the things that's not in the report, but I've been looking at very closely, are the number of companies and individuals that we have engaged with on the LSO topic from a MEF point of view.
Mm.
They're up 93% since, the number of companies we've engaged with, the service providers, is up 93%
Wow.
since June of 2022.
Right.
And the number of individuals that have engaged with MEF, downloaded our reports, participated in webinars or other activity that we have, that's grown more than 100%.
Nice.
So we, and just this week, for example, we had discussions at a senior level with a large service provider, and we probably had 25 people engaged in the room or calling in.
Right.
And in one case, I think, I don't know, we had probably 200 individuals from a service provider, a huge service provider, who are engaging with us on the LSO topic. That's just from one company.
Yeah,
So
that's
we're
key too,
seeing,
right? Because you
yeah,
have some of these are very large organizations and don't have sort of perfect communication across all these different divisions of that organization where this could be impactful. And so it's a big effort to get all of the
yeah,
right people from a large organization talking about this together.
yeah. And if you go back a few years, the database we had, was relatively small for all those individuals that we would need to engage with. But we've seen just a huge uptick in the number of people who've engaged with us. And of course, it's been helpful that we've had strong advocates within both the service provider community, players like AT&T, Colt,
Hmm.
and others, as well as the LSO solution providers. We've got a fantastic set of LSO solution providers that are helping the service providers implement the APIs, and those players are listed in the report. But think about the benefits that we're bringing to the table. They're outlined in the report, but just kind of run through some of them. The primary reason why service providers are implementing the APIs right now, the business process APIs, is to accelerate service delivery.
Hmm.
And we're getting reports of an average of 25% reduction in order cycle times,
Right.
right? And so, if you can accelerate your service delivery, that improves that customer experience. You're guaranteed to accelerate time to revenue on every single LSO and API enabled order, right? That improved customer experience can help increase loyalty.
Right. Right.
And it's been a fantastic story, and really excited about what we're seeing.
Yeah, but to put a pin in that point, so certainly it's what the enterprises are looking for. That's what they want to cut those provisioning times down. They want to cut some friction out of the transaction and process itself. But that also it's more efficient for the carrier internally, right? So
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So, most of the people that engage with us, let's say you're dealing with the buy side of a service provider. They're working with their seller partner to implement the APIs, but the other side of the house, within that buyer, is the team that's facing the enterprise customer.
hmm.
And so, one buyer told us, the pre-validation of the orders is saving, quote, a huge amount of time and human resources by reducing or eliminating the order rejects and reworks. And that's all being done without disturbing the end customer.
Right.
So, and then on the sales side, we've heard similar comments about absolutely faster service delivery. They're increasing the operational efficiency, reducing the human errors, and just really saving time in the pre-sales department. And to give you just a little bit more color on what it means for a seller, I had a conversation with the service provider, an international seller, who is trying to work with their buyer partner. They want to see their buyer partner implement the APIs. They said, "Look, we have a resource totally dedicated to this tier one buyer. We'd love to see them implement so we could free up that resource, right?"
Hmm.
It's just an individual doing one single job, responding to quotes,
Right. Right.
requests for quotes, right? And often those quotes, it might be 100 to 1 or even more ratio
Yeah.
before that turns into an order.
Absolutely.
So you're talking about someone who's completely dedicated, and they said, look, if we do this automation, you know, we don't need them focused on that role,
Right.
right? They can do something else with that person, sell, do higher value
Yeah,
sales, right?
and probably something that individual in that role might find more fulfilling and interesting too, right?
Well, and
Like,
and think about your commission. Isn't your commission going to be better,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
If you have more success than you're dealing with 100 to 1 ratio on quotes to orders.
yeah.
If you can sell security, you can sell managed services, you can sell a network as a service type solution or whatever, right?
Yeah, and
And
there's a broader point about the economy here too. There's some gloom and doom about just AI and automation and machine to machine and things like that in general. And I very much see it as there's already a labor and skills gap out there in a bunch of industries, right? And so it very often doesn't spell the death of the role. It spells the expansion of the role into being able to take rote activities out of human hands, which sounds really good in a lot of
Well,
cases, right?
and I think, and just to, kind of deal with that point, right? If you're on the, if you're thinking about, well, what does this mean ultimately for my job?
Hmm.
Well, one thing is, first of all, you need to be aware of this trend, right?
It's
You need
happening,
to be
right?
launching
Yeah,
this trend. If you're sitting there and you're engaged in manual processes and you're just kind of clicking along, thinking, hey, we're just going to keep going as business as usual. Well, you're not going to be able to do that.
yeah,
You're gonna have surprises, because I'll give you, just to kind of drive that point home. You know, when we look at the forecast for the number of countries where we're going to see LSO enabled service providers, sellers, right? We're now on track for about 50 countries around the world
right.
who will have at least one service provider who's LSO enabled. That means if you are not automated in your sell process, working with your big buyers, then you're going to face that competition
Yeah,
from somebody in your country, right? And in a lot of countries, you're going to have at least two. And I mean, that's kind of the goal, right?
right,
If you're a
right.
buyer, you want to have at least two choices in country. And so, my message to the wholesale sales team is be very careful, pay attention to what's going on in your region, because you want to be in a position to be able to sell in an automated way. You don't want to be surprised, right? You don't want to be surprised and start losing business because you're not automated.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That is the key there. That so there's not just that this makes you attractive, that it makes your internal processes smoother. It's that it's do it or lose business to those who have have
Yeah.
done it.
Well,
So
yeah,
yeah.
and I'll just give you, there was one company I was chatting with in the APAC region, and I asked him, well, where are you on this journey?
Hmm.
And he said, well, we're not quite there yet. They're kind of still going through some restructuring of what they're doing internally, but they said, we've been told that we could have a premium for adopting these
Right,
APIs, because basically they emerge as a preferred provider,
right.
right? So there's, on the one side, you could have the threat of losing revenue, and on the other side, well, you emerge as a preferred provider. Which one do you want to be, right?
Hmm. Hmm. And on both on the two-sided market, a preferred provider, right? Like a preferred partner for other telcos and a preferred supplier for the enterprises.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you think about it, so that's kind of from the seller perspective. They can emerge as a preferred provider. They can have less threat to their losing revenue with,
Hmm.
with a seller, with a buyer who's enabled. But on the buy side, the good thing now is a lot of these seller partners are stepping forward implementing the APIs. So if you haven't implemented the APIs on the buy side now, it's a really good time to look at it, because you can start down that road, and you can leverage the investments that have already been made. So
Right.
you could, and I'll give you a good example. There was a company I chatted with at ITW who's looking to build out a network as a service offering, and they're trying to go and look at individual countries, in the regions where they want to offer network as a service, and they're just kind of going down and sort of, saying, hey, would I be able to have an LSO enabled partner here, here, here?
Right.
Well, that map is going to take some time to fill out, but ultimately what you're going to have is you're going to be able to go down that list, and you're going to be able to say, okay, I can get it in these countries. I need to go find out who else is going to be implementing here. But ultimately what you're going to do is you're going to have that nice foundation to work with. So step forward on the buy side, start to engage with your seller partners. If you haven't looked at the APIs thus far, you definitely want to start doing that now, because there's more. There are more sellers out there, and there are also more buyers stepping forward, having those discussions with their partners. So you want to hop in line too, because you want to be able to implement your APIs with your partner and kind of have them thinking about working with you.
Hmm. Hmm.
And we've got various resources that can accelerate that,
Right.
right? So like what we call the LSO API onboarding and interop test service, where you can you can leverage that environment, that testing environment, to implement the APIs with your partners.
Yeah, and then your sort of tech folks don't have to remake the wheel, right? It's already sitting
They
there.
don't have
Yeah,
to remake the wheel.
yeah,
That's true.
yeah,
Yeah, so there's a lot of assistance out there, and those solutions are highlighted in the report.
yeah. So Stan, we're running low on time here, but one thing I do want to make sure that we hit before we wrap it up is just, blockchain. I know that's something you guys are working on. It is one of those things in the tech world where everyone always wants to talk about it. It's exciting. There's a lot of potential, but it's hard sometimes to focus that in on, okay, what is blockchain actually going to do for me as a provider, say? So what's your take on that?
Yeah, so we go into well, we've had quite a few discussions within MEF around blockchain, right? And we have initiatives, what we call the LSO blockchain. So, first of all, let's be clear, it's not, Ethereum.
Right, where you're not going to make a MEF cryptocurrency, right?
Right. It's not
Yeah,
cryptocurrency. What we're focusing on is really making sure that we further reduce the friction in the billing and settlement
yeah.
process,
Hmm.
right? That's where the key focus of our work has been. And we've had players like, Sage Management involved in that. And they're, again, they're profiled in the report. Uh, but, just to give you an idea, we have the APIs, the APIs that focus on, or, that deal with the function of billing, right?
Hmm.
But what we're doing on the LSO blockchain front is dealing with this whole issue of resolution, right? So you up until now, you think about the overall billing process. It's been highly efficient and error prone, right? It can take 45 to 60 days per order, and it's a point of contention between buyers and sellers, right?
Right, right.
It can cost individual service providers millions of dollars per year, just the whole dispute issue, right? So revenue recovery is a really time-consuming process, and so service providers are heavily focused on what can they do to make sure that they're dealing with a common set of information that cannot be reputed,
Right.
right? So that's where blockchain comes in. Blockchain and smart contracts; those are really key areas of work, and my teammate Daniel Barlev, our VP for Strategic Initiatives, is heavily focused on that topic and working with quite a few companies on the blockchain issue.
Yeah,
And we
absolutely.
do have some what we call showcase, work around that. A couple of projects focusing on that, and we'll be sharing more about that at GNE.
Yeah, and I think that's a great plug as we wrap it up for the conference itself, because I think one of the great things about it is that through these showcases, through the awards, and the proofs of concept and whatnot, you get to see, okay, so this is all really interesting. What does it really mean? Like when I have a demo that shows, okay, I'm going to spin up a circuit from Hong Kong to Frankfurt, and this is what it looks like and how long it would take. I always really get a lot out of that personally. So
Yeah,
definitely
yeah,
plug for that. So Stan, I want to wrap us up with a question I love to ask people kind of at the end of conversations like this, which is everything we've been talking about, to me almost like questions whether going forward there is kind of maybe this is a little philosophical, but a WAN. So a WAN used to be a thing that I bought from my carrier. It was a, this MPLS. The whole idea behind it, it was virtually private. It was a thing that I put out this RFI with all of these parameters. Are we moving more to a world where sort of connectivity is something that you buy on an as needed basis, sometimes even as short as hourly, and everything kind of else that we've traditionally thought of as the WAN maybe happens on the overlay, kind of over the top, and we get to this world where there isn't some kind of thing that I could put a pin on that is my WAN. Do you see what I'm saying there?
well, I think if you talk to our CTO Pascal,
Hmm.
he'll talk about the internet access and the overlays
Yeah.
and all that more dynamic environment, and especially there's a lot of attention focused on the overlays and edge compute
Right.
and so forth. I think obviously we're in a big transition period, right?
Hmm.
So the way I think about it is in order to get to this sort of nirvana where you've got all these dynamic services, you've got this on-demand environment, and you do have these services that don't stay up very long. That is going to require a tremendous amount of transformation.
Yeah,
You can do it within data center environments, but when you start to talk about access networks and all that, there's a lot of investment.
Just over provisioning that has to be there, right?
Yeah, so there'll be this transition. It'll take a lot of time. You'll see quite a few innovations in companies that have the resources. They can put to that. But the industry has to move along as a whole, and so that's really what we're focusing on. Mm-hmm. Is how do we bring the ecosystem? How do we take companies, regardless of where they are in this journey? How do we move them from maybe manual processes or limited number of automation processes to a much more automated type of situation? Just like, everybody, as you kind of go through life, you look at how can you be more efficient with what you do, at home or wherever, right?
Right.
And whatever projects you're working on, you're trying to be more efficient with it. And that's what we want to do as an industry. How can we shift it in that direction? And that begins, well, if you think about it, and this will be part of the discussions that we have at the G&E event as well. But if you think about it, it requires a strategic decision-making shift, right?
Right.
It's got to be driven at a strategic level, a high level.
Mm-hmm.
So you change your corporate strategy. You look at how you evolve your service portfolio. You update your networks. You automate as many processes as you can internally, then externally. You look at how you can drive a greater efficiency in the billing and settlement process with things like with blockchain, right? So increase your margins by reducing friction, eliminating cost, and all that stuff. And then how can you work with that broader ecosystem of partners to increase your value over time, right? And as a service provider, you also have to keep in mind it's not just that service provider evolution in dealing with all your players, but you've also got the cloud, hyperscaler threat,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So that's kind of always the cloud that's taking over the telecom community, right?
Yeah.
So you really just want to make sure that you're more nimble, you're more agile, and you're able to adapt to that environment, in a better way than maybe in the past.
Yeah, that was a very lucid blueprint, I think, of how to get from here to there. That was excellent. Thanks. All right, so Stan, this was great fun. I really appreciate it. I can't wait to catch up at the G&E event in October here. In the meantime, listeners that want to follow you or your work at MEF, you already mentioned the URL for the specific report, but any other places they can find you or MEF in general?
Yeah, so we have MEF on LinkedIn. Well, first of all, thank you, Greg, for the opportunity. It's always great to chat with you. We have MEF on LinkedIn. You can download the report at mef.net/report. You can always feel free to reach out to me directly at stan@mef.net. Mm-hmm. I'm happy to engage in discussion with all types of industry professionals. So
awesome.
Enterprises, service providers, whoever you are, feel free to reach out.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. It's great to get perspectives from the whole ecosystem, as it were, as we've been talking about. Cool. All right. Well, yeah. Thanks so much, Stan. We'll definitely talk again soon. And I'll just say we're recording this in July. Stan and I both like hiking. If you go for a hike this weekend, stay in the shade. It's scorching out there.
Bring 3 extra water bottles.
Yeah, exactly. I'm assuming down southern Virginia is just as hot as it is here in Northern Virginia.
Yeah. Just the waterfalls are not flowing like they used to.
Yes, exactly. You could see them evaporating before your eyes. Excellent. All right. Thanks so much, Stan. Cheers.
Okay, take care. Bye.
Thanks for listening. Telegeography Explains the Internet comes from the experts here at Telegeography. It's edited and produced by Jane Miller, and it's hosted by me, Greg Bryan. And I also wrote that theme song you're listening to right now. To learn more about our data, jump over to telegeography.com, and we'll see you on the Internet.